Velvet Hour Stolen Vows. The first clue was not lipstick or a scent I didn't buy, it was time. 10 slippery minutes here, a quarter hour there, always explained with a smile and a traffic app. Time is the easiest thing to borrow and the hardest thing to pay back. I only noticed because I'm a sound engineer. My life runs on cues and counts, on the way a song never lies about its length. Call it professional hazard. I can hear when reality is off by a beat. Lena and I had been married for years, the kind that look fine in photos, brunches, anniversaries, a bicycle in one image that suggested we shared hobbies. She was a stylist, the person who makes other people look like their best decisions. I worked nights at the Velvet Hour, a music bar with a copper ceiling and an audience that pretended not to be listening. We were a before and after couple. I caught the late shows. She had early clients. We met in the middle like trains timed to pass. On a Tuesday that dressed itself like a Monday, my phone lit up in the sound booth with a message from an account I didn't know. No profile picture, just a name, Nightjar. The message was a single link, shortened and suspicious, followed by 3 words: "You deserve context." I should have ignored it. I should have reported it and gone back to chasing a stubborn hum in the monitors. Curiosity is just courage wearing perfume, I told myself, and tapped. A gallery opened, grainy black and white photos like a detective's scrapbook. They were from the Rook and Rye, the kind of speakeasy that sells its secrecy to people who need a hobby. A woman in the foreground, head tipped back in laughter, hand on a man's wrist, the intimacy of fingers threaded through conversation. It took me 4 images to admit the woman was Lena. It took me 5 to realize the man wasn't me. None of the shots were vulgar. If they'd been vulgar, I could have shut the book and called it a misunderstanding. This was worse. This was a series of gestures you only practice with someone you let memorize your pulse. Her leaning in to tell him something not meant for air, his palm resting on the inside edge of her knee as if it belonged there, her mouth at his ear in a whisper I could hear without hearing. The last image was of a door. Suite 407, the kind of number that looks like it has a memory. I typed before thinking, "Who are you?" The reply came fast. Someone who thought she was the only one being made a fool of. "Name?" I asked. My hands were steady in a way that felt theatrical. "Ray," she wrote. "He's Caleb. Your wife and my not-quite-husband have the kind of Thursday routine that would impress a metronome. If you want to hear the song in full, meet me tomorrow. 6 p.m. the Velvet Hour. Corner table near the mirror. Wear whatever you'd wear if you were meeting a stranger to talk about a private catastrophe." I stared at that sentence until it turned into a rhythm. Then I went back to work because the set wasn't going to mix itself. On stage, a trio slid into a slow number, the kind of jazz that makes your skeleton remember dancing. I pretended my hands were too busy to text Lena my usual break time hello. I pretended a lot of small things until it was almost morning and the city had washed its face. Ray was there early, which I respect. She had a black bob and a trench that made her look like she had recently outsmarted the weather. When she stood to greet me, I saw the nerves, but they were arranged, like furniture in a room for guests. "Alex," she said. I nodded. We shook hands like colleagues on a project. "I didn't want to send those photos," she began, before I'd even sat. But I remembered thinking, while looking at them alone, that I would have wanted someone to do that for me. "Do what?" I asked. "Break my heart with an attachment, very neighborly." "That's fair," she said. I told myself it was a kindness, and kindness is such a good liar. We didn't ask the server for anything stronger than coffee. The Velvet Hour at 6 smelled like oranges and furniture polish, as if the day had dressed up to be in the room. I asked Ray how long. She said, "Long enough that I'm ashamed of my timeline." She didn't list dates. She didn't need to. She had the sort of face that turns facts into confession. He told me he'd proposed to me in his head twice, she said. Turns out he was practicing his vows on Thursdays. And Lena, I said, tasting my own wife's name like a mouthful of coins. She leaves a note on the counter. Pilates, errands, dinner with June. A calendar of harmless words. Ray slid a keycard across the table. Rook and Rise upstairs rooms use these, she said. They don't change the codes often. I borrowed this from a friend who borrows things for a living. Tomorrow's Thursday. You want to catch them, I said, not a question. I want them to face us without spin, she said. No yelling in hallways, no ugly genius. We stand in the doorway and we ask for the one thing they've been keeping for each other, honesty. I considered anger like a menu item and decided it would only give me indigestion. What if we find out what we already know? I asked. Then we get our lives back, she said. Or pieces of them, the pieces they didn't touch. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay beside Lena and watched the ceiling like it was going to write me a message. She turned in her sleep and tucked her foot between my calves the way she does when she dreams ordinary dreams. I wanted to love her so hard I'd forget how to count, but I couldn't unhear the silence of the room. Thursday smelled like rain rehearsing. I did my job with mechanical mercy. The band that night was a quartet of 20-somethings who played with the methodical joy of people discovering their hands for the first time. At 5:40, I texted Ray. I'm early. She wrote back. I don't know what to wear to a crisis, so I'm bringing all my selves. The Rook and Rise lobby was a mood board. Velvet chairs, dim lamps, a clerk who had perfected the art of pretending he knew less than he did. Ray arrived in that trench again, hair pulled back with a ribbon that made her look younger and older at once. You ready? She asked. No, I said, but I'm here. Suite 407 was at the end of a hallway that seemed longer than the building. The carpet swallowed our steps. Ray slid the card into the reader with the kind of calm that only exists on boats and in lies. The light went green. The door opened an inch, then two. We didn't go in. We left it on the latch, not a trap, an invitation. They came at 5:19. I know because I watched the time in the crown of my watch the whole way down the hall. Caleb laughed first, an easy, careless sound. Lena followed, saying something I couldn't hear. The door clicked. The latch held. Hello, Ray said, her voice a perfect E-flat. We thought we'd save you the trouble of making up a story. Lena froze like a deer that speaks French. Caleb was slower, calculating how much trouble each word might buy him. None of us raised our voices. Ray kept her hands in her pockets like she was keeping company with herself. We're not here to perform, I said. We're here because we're tired of detective work. Lena's chin dropped. She always looks down before she apologizes. Alex, she said softly, I wanted to. To what? I asked. Tell me when I ask the right question. Teach me about coincidence. Caleb reached for Ray's arm. She stepped back half a foot and it looked like a mile. We don't need to make a mess, he said, as if mess were a thing that belonged to the person who pointed it out. Ray nodded at the keycard still in the slot. You left a breadcrumb trail, she said, almost gently. We only followed it to the place you already were. We stood in that doorway long enough to make an outline of each other. Then Ray took the card from the door, handed it to Caleb like a canceled appointment and said, whatever this was, it's over. Whether you two are over is between you and your appetites. We left without theatrics. The elevator performed its duty. The city opened its mouth and let us out. We walked without choosing a direction. Rain finally arrived, considerate and cool. I thought I'd be screaming, I said. Me too, Ray said. Turns out the loudest part was seeing it. We found a diner that hadn't figured out it was fashionable yet and slid into a booth with cracked red vinyl. We didn't drink. We ordered pancakes at an hour that made them taste like hope. Ray told me about the ring she'd picked out herself because Caleb said he wanted her to have exactly what she wanted. She realized, while paying for it, that she didn't know what that was anymore. I told her about the way Lena had started sleeping with the window open, as if oxygen were the missing ingredient. We shared these details not to build a case, but to recognize the shape of our loneliness. I went home to a silent apartment. Lena was there, perched on the edge of the bed like an apology. I didn't mean to become this person, she said. It's what all disasters say. It was supposed to be a spark, not a fire. I know, I said, but you brought matches to a room full of curtains. We didn't fight. We tried to talk about open marriage and honesty and the human talent for mislabeling desire as freedom. We cried a little, the way careful people do, like we were spilling something expensive. I told her I needed space. She said she understood. We made a list of practical steps, keys, accounts, the orbit of friends, and put it on the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a pear. Days became a kind of choreography I didn't audition for. Work, run, eat, sleep, repeat. Nights were longer. The velvet hour dimmed the lights and I practiced listening to music as if it were medicine. The ache was quieter, but it didn't leave. Ray texted on a Sunday with nothing attached but a question. "How's your breathing?" I wrote back, like I'm learning a new instrument. She sent a photo of the river from her window with a caption, "The city keeps flowing no matter what we drop in it." I liked the idea that grief was a stone that made a pattern and then disappeared. We didn't rush toward anything. We met for walks where our elbows touched by accident and then on purpose. We tried our hands at platonic friendship like adults in a brochure. It worked until it didn't. It was the kitchen that did it. My kitchen, small and reliable, with a window that captures the late sun like it's a rumor. Ray came over with a tote of groceries and a smile that had practiced being brave all week. She cooked the way lovers should talk, attentive, bright, unafraid of heat. The pan hissed. She leaned in. I stood too close. We bumped shoulders. When she looked at me, I saw what I looked like reflected in her. A man still careful, but not made entirely of caution. We put on a record because silence is sometimes too honest. We ate standing up, laughing at nothing, her wrist brushing mine as she reached for the salt. It was the most erotic thing in the world, the way our restraint began to fray. No vulgarity, no rush, just that long magnetic pause before a choice. "I don't want to become them by accident," she said, voice low, thumb on the stem of her wineglass. "We won't," I said. "We'll become us on purpose, or we won't, but we won't lie." She nodded and came to me with the kind of slowness that isn't hesitation, it's reverence. I kissed her like a confession I'd finally learned the words to. It was soft and clear and profoundly unsuitable for public consumption, which is, paradoxically, exactly what would pass on YouTube, the tenderness you need to be quiet to notice. Her hands found the back of my neck. My palms learned the lines of her spine. We didn't stage anything for an audience. We wrote a scene only the room would remember. When we broke apart, we were grinning and a little shy, which felt like proof we were still human. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay," I echoed, like a contract signed in breath. The divorce became paperwork slowly, as if paper could cushion the fall. Lena and I were kind in the way of people who had been each other's weather. She moved into a studio near a park with a dog she'd always wanted. I stayed within walking distance of the velvet hour and bought a plant I promised not to kill. We texted sometimes, small, responsible updates about bills and mutual friends. She wrote once, "I'm sorry in a way that will last years," and I believed her. Ray and I rehearsed a new ordinary. We cooked together and invented ridiculous desserts. We danced in socks on tile. On certain nights, she came to the velvet hour and sat at the mirror table with a book she didn't read. When the band slid into something slow, I'd catch her eye across the room and feel the simple, trouble-free want of a person who knows he is wanted back. Months later, I found the Nightjar account again, the message thread already a relic. I typed, "Thank you," and meant it. Ray, lying on my couch in my sweater, looked up from her magazine. "Who are you thanking?" she asked. "The ghost that turned on the light," I said. She smiled. "Let's keep them out," she said, meaning both ghosts and lights, meaning privacy and honesty and the small work of tending to the life we decided to try. We still talk about that night in the hallway sometimes, not to relive it but to remember the rule it taught us. Doors are for walking through or closing gently, never for slamming. When we make love soft, unhurried, the kind that leaves more air in the room than it takes, we're careful to be exactly here. No borrowed alibis, no rehearsed lines, just the evidence of skin and the kind of kiss you can't counterfeit. The Velvet Hour has a new bartender who mixes a drink called the Stolen Vow, smoky, sweet, with a citrus twist. He named it without knowing us. On slow nights after last call, Ray and I take two stools at the end of the bar, clink glasses, and tell the truth about our days. Sometimes she laughs, head tipped back the way Lena did in those photos. It doesn't wound me anymore. It reminds me that a gesture doesn't belong to a person. It belongs to the moment. And this moment is ours. If there's a moral, I don't sell it. I have a story instead. It begins with time and ends with time. The minutes I didn't notice slipping away, and the hours I now spend watching sunlight move across the wall of a room we chose. There's intrigue, sure, and a kind of erotica so ordinary you'd miss it if you blinked. Hands rinsing cherries together, a thumb tracing a jawline in lamplight, two people laughing into each other's shoulders because the joke lives there. There's betrayal too, but only as a prologue. The rest is a quiet crescendo, a chorus we hum in our sleep, a soft, stubborn promise to keep the beat and never pretend the song is shorter than it is.